Okay. So welcome to the conf21 edition of the Edinburgh Virtual Splunk User Group. Again, virtual because of restrictions. One day, very soon, we should be getting news about if we can do in-person user groups again. It's just a Splunk policy that we're still doing this virtually. I'll click to the next slide if I can. My laptop's being a bit slow, so things are just skipping back and forth. So just a note about who's sponsoring this user group. If you've been to many of these in the past, you probably know this already, but it's sponsored by Adarma Security, who are one of the largest Splunk delivery partners for the UK. Myself and Tom work for them, but this is a community-focused user group, so that's all you're going to hear about Adarma. Just a reminder that this user group is being recorded, and I will be uploading this to YouTube within hopefully the next couple of days. I might be a bit busy, so it might be next week. So just as a reminder, if you do want to publicly mention something, it will be online, so try not to discuss confidential information or anything that you don't want to be made public, or clients, for example. I thought we we're going to have another slide about general housekeeping rules, but it might be after this. But the agenda today is myself and Tom are going to try to rattle through as much of .conf as we were able to consume. There was a lot. We didn't get everything. So there might be some announcements that we completely missed, but we're going to try to do our best in describing it. And later on, we do have a raffle for Jetbrains license. That's the slide I was expecting. So yeah, so if you've been here before, you know the rules. We are technically led, so we are not trying to sell a product to anyone, which is a bit weird for a .conf product and presentation, because Splunk's trying to sell you products, and we're going to discuss all of them today. But we're not trying to push a particular product on anyone as part of this user group. We're inclusive. We follow the Berlin Code of Conduct, and I believe there was a new set of guidelines that everybody should have accepted as part of the user group sign check-in process. So we've got extra guidelines to follow, but they're good ones. And we are technology-led, which is essentially the same as we're not salespeople. We're interested in the technology. We want to share that interest with everyone, and hopefully you can share it with us. And yeah, just details of the raffle. We've got annual subscription. I think it might be an annual one, it might be a monthly one, I can't remember, but be a subscription to any Jetbrains product from the following list. We'll do that at the end of the session by essentially just running everyone's name through a raffle generator, so you'll see that later on. So onto the discussion. So I'm going to take the first half, which is going to be platform announcements and observability announcements, and then Tom's going to talk about the security announcements, because there were quite a lot in such a short period of time to sort of discuss. So .conf in a nutshell. There's 201 sessions that are available on the session catalog at the time of me doing this slide. I that's probably the amount that's going to be on there. But they should all be available now. I took some. Got a little laser pointer I can use. So we got some stats here. So 33,000 people attended it, and there were 403 speakers who shared their experience, including Tom. So what's new with Splunk itself? And this is both Splunk Cloud and Splunk Enterprise. They were pushing. Let me rephrase that. That's not really a good. So there's two new ways to ingest data that Splunk were promoting in .conf this year. So you've got Cloud Data Manager, and you've got ingest actions, and I'll go through both of them one by one. So Cloud Data Manager is currently in Splunk Cloud Preview, and I've listed the session here if you want to have a look at what it does. But essentially, it's a way to get cloud native platforms onboarded into your Splunk Cloud in the least steps possible. So the example that they showed off was ingesting AWS data, essentially by filling out 5 boxes and doing 5 clicks. And it would take you through putting in your account details, your IDs, the number of regions that you want to ingest from, and the types of data that you want out of it. And it will just set it all up and go, here's your CloudWatch data, for example. So it was like near instantaneous compared to maybe setting up the AWS add-on, which you have to set up everything in like individual sort of screens. The other major thing that they were advertising was this thing called ingest actions. So imagine if you have a massive log source, but you don't need all the information in it, but at current time, but you want to keep it for, say, audit purposes. So in Splunk Cloud Preview and Splunk Enterprise Beta, you can use ingest actions to essentially create rules to say, essentially regex rules to say, I want this data to either be like masked to do like obviously masking, or you can route it into different locations. So for example, all this data here is being masked, and you can then click this route button and say, oh, I want to send it to an AWS bucket, and it'll just do that on the fly. And then the rest of the data will just go through the normal ingestion mechanism as expected. And this is also part of the enterprise license, so there's no additional costs from what I can tell for this product. And then there's a whole bunch of other platform announcements. So sort of quick fire around here. So one of the more curious ones is a thing called Flex Index, which looks like it's a new indexing type, which is meant for these sort of long-term forensics investigations where you don't need the information hot and ready to search at the time, but you might want to look back and do some forensics and historic investigations. So what it appears to do is, instead of putting it into like a hot bucket, it'll put it into some compressed bucket and I think it's cheaper to do it like that, but then it will take a bit longer to search that bucket. So I'm not 100% sure how it works yet, but it seems quite interesting that they're providing this sort of capability. Another thing that they really liked to announce is the ACL API, which is essentially a better way for cloud admins to update things in Splunk Cloud rather than going through support to update allow lists and things like that. So there's an expanded API out there that allows you to update IP allow lists and HEC tokens, and it now allows the installation of private apps through that API, and they're working on public apps. So that'll save admins a lot more time than having to raise support cases. Another thing that they were really interested in advertising is Victorious Experience, which just seems like a very elastic platform for scaling up and down resources as needed. Again, I don't really know a lot about it, even though I've heard about it in quite a few sessions. But this is available to, I think they said, about a third to half of all public cloud users already. So it's just going to roll out as it will. Federated search. Now, this has shown up in the past as data fabric search, I believe, but this is expanded to allow cloud to cloud, on-prem to on-prem, and on-prem to cloud functionality. Essentially, all you need to do is set up a user which has the federated search role and the right role permissions to access that data, and then you can just run searches across both that infrastructure. So you can just write one search and it just fires it off to your on-prem and to your cloud, for example. And one major difference that I did notice, because I researched the heck out of data fabric search, is data fabric search only returned precompiled stats as part of its processing, but this new federated search capability seems to return events as well. So it seems a bit better than data fabric search already. Workload pricing. All cloud customers can now use workload pricing, so you pay for compute units, so what you use Splunk for, rather than ingest data like the traditional licensing. And they've also provided new dashboards to provide admins with a handy view of what their virtual compute usage is on like an hourly basis, including thresholdings and what the optimal threshold could be. So maybe if you're paying for too many compute units, you can scale back based on the dashboard, for example. And then I think finally, I don't know if I've got another slide after this for platform. They're constantly updating the search and reporting experience, and there's new way of searching in preview at the moment. So they've got a multi-statement search, which is a bit like Jupyter workbooks, and I think this was demonstrated in last year's conf a bit more when they were talking about I think the machine learning capabilities within data stream processing. I think some of that was demonstrated there. And then what they like to call a bidirectional no-code exploration, which is essentially just a novice without search experience can create SPL2 on the fly and share that with more knowledgeable or like power users, for example. I think this is the last one for platform changes. So they announced Smart Store support for Azure. Dashboard Studio is constantly being updated. I think the new version in preview or beta has token usage in it now, or like much better token usage than is in general availability, and it's now supported in Splunk Mobile. And finally, Splunk Operator for Kubernetes has been updated, if you're a big fan of that, so you can just deploy Splunk installations very quickly. And there's been updates to help with apps installations, for example. And speaking of Kubernetes, we move on to observability. Now, I must admit that I don't have a lot of experience with observability, and a lot of this is going to be reading the slides. Let's just navigate forward if James wants to. So, Splunk Observability and Splunk Log Observer. So I think in the past, Splunk had a Log Observer tool, but is now directly in Splunk Observability Cloud. This is going to be really fun to keep saying observability over and over again. So essentially, it allows Splunk Cloud and Observability Cloud customers to be able to essentially go from your trace information from, say, a transaction or an app or a web server logs to an actual event to help narrow down what might be causing slow transactions or a customer flow stoppage, for example. And it also helps onboard a large number of telemetry sources, including OpenTelemetry, which Splunk is a big provider for, Kubernetes, and Fluentd logs. Always-on profiling helps with matching trace to events. So essentially, you're putting trace information against the visibility of what your code is doing. So if you have I'm not quite sure what's in this example from the presentation slides, but if you've got a slow trace, for example, here, and it says line whatever in your code as part of the trace or the event stack in the always-on profiling, you'd be able to just go into IDE and work out, oh, this line of code is causing the slowness, so I need to peer review this, essentially. Database query performance, essentially the same thing as the previous slide, but it's with database queries, and it'll tell you which database queries are having high execution costs or taking forever to do, which is very useful for the majority of this sort of observability. For example, if your basket database query is just a tad too slow, your customers are just going to like empty basket and throw the app away, for example. So having the ability to see what is causing the most latency in your system is very handy to have. And they've also introduced real user monitoring in iOS and Android apps, so you can not only trace web server information, but also mobile app information. and you can get that observability on Splunk Mobile in the form of dashboards and various metrics. And finally, for me for now, so we now have new contact packs for ITSI. There's a new Office 365 pack for Exchange, SharePoint, and Power BI insights. Is essentially the same as your ES content packs, for example. They had another product called Auto Detect that I don't really know too much about, but it should just automatically detect cases of like your high container restarts in your for Kubernetes, for example, and open telemetry support. So, like I mentioned a bit earlier, Splunk is a investor in open telemetry, and they've donated this eBPR collector, which is a very low latency approach to application and kernel telemetry. Yeah, so now we're on security. So I'm going to mute myself and Tom's going to take over.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew. I'm just glad I don't have to say observability too many times. Hi, guys. So this is my first time as, I guess, the co-leader with Andrew. So those of you who aren't aware, obviously our esteemed previous leader, Harry, stepped down. So it's now me and Andrew at the tiller, if you like. So thank you for having me. And unfortunately, you're going to hear a lot more from me over the next coming months and hopefully years. Next slide, please. Okay, so obviously anyone who knows me knows that I am SOAR focused at the moment. So I did watch quite a few of the security things. Obviously, a lot of them seem to be around risk, which I'll get onto in a minute. But some of the kind of, I guess it wasn't a major announcement at Conf, but some of the big announcements in the direction that Splunk are going, especially with, for example, their SOAR product is Splunk SOAR so Phantom was renamed to Splunk SOAR. Quite a while ago now, when it came out as a SaaS product, it still remained Phantom for the on-prem version until very recently. But effectively, this is Phantom in the cloud. They've kind of rebuilt it, if you like, in the way that it works. My understanding is it's quite container-based now, which you can't really do with the on-prem version. The license is what kind of provides you with the resources, right? So the license in Splunk SOAR is a user-based license, so you pay for how many people are using the product, and then they will effectively scale, or that's how many, your resource allocation will be based on what your seats license is. So the events license has been gone for a long time now, so it's primarily based on how many seats you have. But because obviously it's in the cloud, there's that kind of disconnect where you can't take action on the on-premise, Active Directory servers, Exchange servers. Obviously, people do still, or customers do still have on-premise stuff. And reaching out from the cloud and taking direct action usually isn't the best security way to do it, because effectively you would be punching a hole through your firewall from the cloud into any part of your infrastructure in order to take action. So what they built is called an automation broker. So it's a small Docker container that's pre-built and relatively simple to deploy for most use cases. Obviously, *** could be complications. And what that is it's a Docker container that it actually reaches out. So they've got this thing called SpaceBridge, which is Splunk sort of controlled and built. And your Splunk SOAR instance, if you want to take action on a remote instance, say a local infrastructure using the automation broker, Splunk SOAR will send the action request to the SpaceBridge. And then the broker reaches out to the SpaceBridge, picks up that item from the queue, takes it obviously on-prem, does what it needs to do, and then returns those results back to the SpaceBridge, and then obviously back to your cloud platform. So it's a more secure way of providing that kind of cloud to on-prem sort of touching point where you can actually now take actions on-prem. There is some limitations, like I think it's like 500 actions per minute or hour, I can't remember what it is, but there is some limitations. So if obviously it's a highly used application or integration, then you are probably going to need a few Docker instances and a few different assets in your SOAR configuration to kind of provide, that volume, if you like, without seeing any potential issues. So when you configure an asset in the cloud for your Splunk SOAR integration, be it, like I say, Active Directory, Exchange, or any other capability, then instead of like just leaving it, there is actually an option to select an automation broker. There is obviously some steps you need to do to make Phantom or Splunk SOAR, be able to see that automation broker, but it is pretty easy to configure. But the main thing was there was a new visual playbook editor released as well. And when it first came out, it was version 5.0. And now that the on-prem version has caught up, we're actually on 5.0.1 with a new release coming out relatively soon as well, because they are releasing them about every month at the moment. They're releasing changes. Next slide, please, Andrew. And then, of course, we get to the on-prem version. So it is now formally known as Phantom. I mean, the APIs are still Phantom dot something, so it's still quite hard sometimes to get rid of that Phantom name, if you like, for now. But we'll see. They might change that in the future. I hope they don't, because I actually quite like Phantom. Again, it was recently renamed. Literally, I think it was beginning of September or somewhere along those lines, where it basically brought, once the cloud platform had been upgraded to 5.0.1, they made the switch over. So what you'll also notice if you are going into the documentation for Phantom quite a bit, is that it's now actually got a separate location for Splunk SOAR, and all of the documentation is now available in there, even for the previous versions when it was known as Phantom. Some of the main updates, and again, obviously these were also in the cloud platform, but rather than sort of clutter the slide, I thought I'd just bring them on here. So there's now 2 playbook types that you can configure within Splunk SOAR. Splunk SOAR or Phantom has always been good at sort of modular playbooks, small playbooks that do the same thing every time and can be chained together as part of a process. But what they've done now is they've kind of separated them to automation, which is the ones that you would kind of kick off automatically. So they would run on the ingest of an event. And then they've got input playbooks, which can't be called automatically or by a user, but they are specifically made to be those modular playbooks. And the main thing about them is that they have, and I will show a very brief demo in a minute. Hopefully my machine holds up. But you can now actually have inputs and outputs to your playbooks. So previously, to pass information between playbooks, you had to use Phantom APIs to kind of save it in a database under a specific key, and then write the code to retrieve that, and then do what you needed to do with it. But the reason that they've added these inputs and outputs now, which you are limited, there's 10 of each that you can do, but it just means that now passing items between playbooks is 100 million times easier, because you're no longer having to write the code out yourself. And that is kind of the way they're going with Splunk SOAR. They really are trying to move away from that requirement of custom code, which I don't like too much, because I like coding and I like hitting the REST endpoints. But obviously for customers to be able to realize value quicker, obviously custom code, or if there's a lot of custom code required, it can put them off a little bit. There's a couple of other ones. I'll show you the visual playbook editor. It's now vertical rather than horizontal. So it is easier to see everything and configure things, and the action blocks are a little bit wider, so they can give you a bit more context. And there's some other bits that I'll try and just quickly cover in the demonstration. Again, should my bandwidth and laptop hold up. A couple of smaller ones. So you can now choose your logging format to be in JSON. So when your logs go out to Splunk, they can now be in JSON format rather than just plain text, which makes it obviously a lot easier to write rules to monitor Phantom in Splunk. Action concurrency. So previously it was 10. So what it would mean is an asset could only run sort of 10 things at the same time across playbooks. You could up it, obviously, you could up it manually, and there was a kind of resource warning that you might, you just want to monitor your resources, but they've actually defaulted that to 150 now, with some of the platform capabilities that they've increased means that they can default it to 150, and it means you have to build sort of less assets and worry less about things not, or assets not being able to do their job because they're being asked too much, for example. They've added in some password hardening. It's not a lot, it's just some like minimum characters for a password, and some other capabilities you can configure in the platform as well. Previously, there was only I think 10 statuses that you could do. Obviously, you have the kind of normal open, closed, new, But a lot of customers and SOCs as well might have awaiting response from customer, on hold, handover. There's literally any amount of statuses that can truly reflect your processes within a SOC, and now you can put up to 30 statuses. You still sort of define them under the original ones, so they get the sort of same priority, but you can now differentiate a lot more statuses. And finally, again, I don't know how many people still use Elastic with Phantom as kind of the data lake element of it, as in that's where you send your Phantom data to instead of Splunk. Obviously, before the acquisition, it was Elastic under the hood, but now they've actually updated it to support the new version of Elastic to version 7. Next slide, please. Next slide, Andrew. Did it go, or is it just on the slow? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is my baby. I'll start off with that as a humble brag. So I did a talk this year at Splunk conference in partnership with HSBC, a lady called Hannah Cornford. And it was titled Risk-Based Response, Maturing Your Security Operations with Risk Awareness and Splunk SOAR, obviously in brackets Phantom, just for those who weren't aware that it had changed its name. So effectively the high level talking points, and obviously I would recommend having a watch of it if it's something that you're interested in. It's effectively designed. So obviously you've got risk-based alerting, which got a lot of visibility at this year's conf as well. Risk-based alerting has really kind of come into its own in the last sort of year and a half. But this risk-based response is kind of after that. So risk-based alerting is the detection piece, and risk-based response is more that response piece. So once you've made some kind of event based on even risk or any event, this is the thing as well. It doesn't have to be a risk-based event that you can run this against. It's designed to use both internal and external data to provide that kind of good, bad, suspicious categorization using automation, using data points that you already or your analysts already use, right? So they will already know that if there's X amount of positives, it's most likely bad. So rather than rely on the analyst to both get that information, put that information into the ticket, and then make that decision, we can automate that. And that means that when they get those events, they're fully enriched. Additionally, it allows easy kind of segregation of false positives. So you can decide to either put them into a tuning bucket for people to review and see if it was a false positive because the rules weren't good enough, or obviously any further metrics you want to get. But the main thing is that it just removes those false positive investigations from analysts. And it also means that their job is a bit better because they're dealing with real security events, and they can feed any knowledge that they gain from that sort of real world activity back into the risk-based response model as well. So you can add more kind of risk context to all of your events from both internal and external data points. The best place to get started is on paper. You can build a very simple scoring matrix that says, this is what I want to investigate. This is the app I want to use. This is the data point or points. Obviously, the more data points, the better the context. And here's how I'm going to mark it if it's good, bad, or suspicious. Again, it uses the modular capability of playbooks, so small playbooks to do your enrichment and scoring, and then once that's finished, the risk score is then understood by the playbook and then either sent down a sort of high, low, or medium path for either a response or escalation. And then finally, you just need to determine the threshold. So if you are going to start applying scores, obviously you can apply maybe 10 for bad, 5 for suspicious, and 0 for good, but you also need to know what your total score would be that would make you go, oh, no, this is all bad, this is all good, or this is suspicious. So the key benefits or key takeaways from risk-based response, I mentioned already, large false positive reduction. For example, one use case at another customer, was like 67% reductions in false positives. It stops analyst fatigue because those high effort, low yield activities. And what I mean by that is just the copy and pasting, updating block list manually, reviewing pieces of data, which can sometimes be huge JSON objects or free text objects. You can take all that off them and let the automation do it at machine speed in parallel. And then when they get the event, it's fully enriched, and all they have to do is use their knowledge and investigative capabilities to actually then work through the ticket. And again, most of those tickets will be tickets that will require some form of action rather than doing all this investigation, get to the end and be like, nah, false positive, waste of time. It also provides breathing space. So, while I talk about the less false positives that the analysts have to deal with and the fact that they get into kind of more, deeper security events, it also means that you free up some time to actually maybe start being more proactive as well. So whereas a SOC under a lot of pressure and high volume, they might not get a lot of time to sort of proactively hunt for things or anything like that because they're so, flooded with false positives and events in general. So if you remove like a huge portion of that, then you should create some sort of breathing space for them to sort of further, feed into either the risk-based response model or any other kind of security capability inside of a SOC. And again, the main thing is consistency as well. So I could ask two different people to go and get me information on an IP address. And even though they may use the same tools, they might come back with different information. One might take longer than the other. Whereas with this approach, everything's consistently done in the same way. And also, if you do want to change that process, there's only one place to change it, which is inside the platform, rather than having to do a full re-education of your analyst to say, actually, just take this now or don't take this. There is a video link to the video. Obviously, you can get it on conf21.com. And if you just look for sec1440A, it'll be right there in the security track. And if you type in risk as well, it'll pop up as one of the top options. Next slide, please. Please watch the video. Okay, so here's some other announcements. So obviously there was the acquisition of TrueStar back in May 2021, and they've now kind of turned it into Splunk Security Intelligence Management, which I find quite a funny thing because you've now got SIEM, and then you've got SIM, Common Information Model, and now you've got SIM, which is Security Intelligence Management. So there's a lot of SIMs and SIEMs and stuff, but either way, what this is it's an intelligence capability or intelligence source for Splunk, right? Using TrueStar's previous existing capabilities. So you can select intelligence sources, open source, premium ones, historical events and alerts as well. And you can actually kind of parse it and add stuff to it and prioritize it, etc. And then you can sort of then share it into different enclaves. So, you might have an enclave that you share with other people in your same industry, for example, which is some of the more sanitized stuff that you don't, that you are able to share more publicly. But then you may have separate enclaves as well for, your local investigations or any of your other specific teams that might be looking for, specific threat intelligence indicators. And again, it's just like most threat intelligence products where you can kind of separate that data and people can then subscribe to those enclaves and pull in your threat intelligence effectively. So they enable unified search for historical events alongside other threat intelligence sources, and they power mission critical executive visibility. That was a bit of a mouthful, apologies. Again, the enclaves are purely for segmentation, but you can synchronize them and send obviously all that information to other tools because there is kind of integrations in there as well to allow you to sort of send those to somewhere else. Again, I've put the TrueStar website, which has all of this information available just on the bottom of the slides for anyone who wants to have a look. Next slide, please, Andrew. This is just kind of, so this is actually one of the pictures on that website. It's actually a dynamic picture, so I did have to wait for it to kind of almost get to the end before I did a quick sort of MacBook snapshot of it. But effectively what it shows you is, from the left-hand side there, you've got your intelligence feeds. You can then collect it, ingest it, you can normalize it, then you can prioritize it. And obviously add it to any of the enclaves that you have set up at that point, so you can connect it to internal teams or external teams. And then there's a unified API which allows you to obviously send it to your CMAPs, SOAR apps, XDR apps. But also what you can see where you've got that kind of loop coming back as well is that you can feed it back into your historical intelligence. So it's caching that information so that next time you need it, or if you're already using it to sort of enrich events or look for indicators in events, then that historical intelligence bucket is always just going to be full of enriched and already prioritized intelligence. Next slide, please. So again, this is just taken from the website. So you can detect, so you can fine tune and filter detection sets, safe list, priority scores to reduce false positives. Again, that's always going to be a good thing. The intelligence pipelines allow you to disseminate that information. Again, allowing you to provide public facing or customer facing or internal facing kind of enclaves, or also sending that information to other tools that you maybe use in order to provide, further enrichment and further context as well. And then there's that normalization and prioritization as well that again helps with investigations and multiple sources for ticket enrichment as well. Next slide, please. So one of the kind of big announcements, I guess, at Splunk was the creation of the Surge team, or just Surge. I can't remember, sorry, what the actual acronym stands for. But effectively what they are is they're Splunk security research and guidance. So they are a team of security experts. I believe my mentor, Rob Gresham, is one of them as well. I think Ryan Kovar is one of the main guys in it as well. He's a very well-known security person in the Splunk arena. And again, what they are is they're going to research, they're going to respond to sort of assistance requests, they're going to educate about threats that are going on in the world, and obviously they'll try and kind of keep in tune with what's going on or what might be coming up, and sort of provide that appropriate context, right? And recommendations as well. Like, we're seeing this happening. Maybe you want to, tune this detection, or maybe you want to think about ingesting these sort of logs or looking for this type of thing. So their main purpose is effectively that kind of both being a reference point and an education point from a well-established team of security experts inside of a company that does have a pretty good focus on sort of security in general. So again, what they'll do is they'll evaluate the latest CISA alerts. They'll determine things like severity, impact to Splunk customers, and of course the wider community. It's not necessarily just about Splunk customers either, although it's a Splunk team effectively. So they'll have some internal capabilities and direction from people on how to better prioritize that. So you'll see things like blogs, you'll see research center, you might even see some prepackaged content for some of these items as well in the future. If they see a specific attack and they've got an easy way to work, or a way to do it in SOAR, for example, or they've got like kind of the ES content update pack, they maybe will start to inject a lot of items into that as well, based on some of the new emerging threats, especially with the different ways of working that everyone's encountered over the last 18 months or so, with a lot more kind of cloud-based and remote working as well. Next slide, please. So these are just a few sort of pictures taken from the actual website. So if you do want to have a look at some of these capabilities in more detail, then you would just go to the Surge website. So they provide some rapid response guides. They've already got these ones available, sort of in a blog medium. So again, sort of both upcoming and new threats, they'll generally be writing a blog about. And obviously, again, where possible, they'll talk about how to do it inside of one of their products, how to resolve it or fight against it, if you like, in one of their existing products. As you can see, that middle one there, mentions Splunk SOAR. So it'll be a blog about what's happening, what the attack is, and then how to react to it, and how to detect it, and then how to react to it with their automation product as well. So yeah, I recommend please have a look in there, because I do think that's going to be a pretty good addition. Obviously, there's a lot of large vendors that already kind of have those teams, but this is obviously Splunk now kind of coming up to the game, and with all of the kind of multitude of technologies that they have in the Splunk stack now, I would hope that some of these will be incredibly rich in detail. And also speed up customer ability to get these things resolved and fought against much quicker. Next, please, Andrew. So also there's conversations with experts. Obviously there will be the ability to, again, reach out to the Surge team. I don't know how that interaction works. Obviously, I don't know all of the bits around it, but again, they are kind of going to be there to assist customers in any journey to sort of defend against well-known attacks, etc. as well. Again, there's videos on kind of, them helping people out with SolarWinds attacks, for example. But again, it's not just going to be limited to SolarWinds. They are going to be available. Again, I don't know how you would kind of, or what that engagement looks like, but they are available as a source of help with security to Splunk customers and beyond, apparently. Next slide, please, Andrew. Again, these are just some further opportunities to explore, I guess, and things that were just on the website. So again, they're going to be kind of more blog related, so they are going to contain lots of rich information. They're going to be written by one of the security researchers as well. And again, they're going to contain enough information for you to either to understand what you need to do to position yourself against an attack, or just give you some sort of guidance on how best to approach them and any other things that are coming as well. Next, Andrew, is that it for the surge? Yeah, you can actually sign up for them as well. So obviously, it's just you'll be getting like email alerts every time they release a new blog. Again, I mean, I've signed up just to get the alerts, so it's definitely worth doing it because again, you know, there's lots of companies out there dedicating time now into kind of setting up these big research teams. So it's definitely worth kind of just keeping your finger on the pulse. And if it's just, you know, it's just another email for you to ingest. So yeah, if you want to sign up for those alerts, then you can through the Surge website. And is that it? Are we on to demo now? No. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can demo here.
Okay. Do you want to stop sharing then, buddy? And I'll see how slow my computer goes when I share my screen.
Yeah. Presenting.
There we go. Always does that. Okay, so you can see my screen. Is it up yet? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so the first thing I thought I'd show you is that obviously the branding in the top left now is just Splunk SOAR. So no more Phantom. Like I say, the only place that you'll see Phantom now is in the actual API calls. They are still Phantom get whatever, Phantom, you know, whatever. But that's really the only main change to the kind of the aesthetics of it at the moment, apart from the new playbook editor. But what I thought I'd show you, again, it's going to be a rough sort of quick demo of kind of the new visual playbook editor and the playbook types. So what you get now, if you create a new playbook, is you get asked this straight away. So it doesn't just build you a new playbook now. It will ask you, what type of playbook do you want to build? So again, it will also give you an explanation. It doesn't just kind of give you the names and expect you to understand. So as you can see, an automation playbook can be triggered. It can also have outputs as well. So whereas the input playbook will both have an input and an output, the automation ones will only have an output because they are expected to be that first playbook that gets called, you know, when it's triggered by, for example, at the moment, only an ingestion, but hopefully soon in the future, there's going to be other ways to trigger playbooks as well, you know, such as status changes, etc. But an input playbook is very much a self-contained playbook that takes both inputs and outputs and can output outputs, still has all the same functionality as a normal playbook, you know, still has action blocks, access to all the custom functions, capability, etc. But it is only meant to be part of a chain of playbooks. It's not meant to be called, you know, kind of ad hoc, if you like. It is meant to take inputs and then obviously do something and then potentially spit out something. So this is the new visual playbook editor. So as you can see, we're now going sort of top down. Also, here's where I would set my inputs and outputs are now actually configured in the start and the end block. So if, for example, actually, I've got a better example of one I've already built. If you were, for example, I've got this IP scoring playbook. Again, it's very simple. It's not really got much in it. But I want to be able to say, present this as an input, which is called list of IPs. I'll provide a help text description as well so that anyone calling this playbook in another playbook kind of understands what I'm asking for the input. I can also stipulate what type of data it is meant to be. So in this case, I know it's only meant to be an IP. What this does is it provides an extra layer of validation for you. So if someone does, for example, try and throw a domain into this list of IPs input, then what you'll find is before this playbook even starts doing anything is it's going to kick back and say there's a validation error. You don't have to set the data type if you don't know it. It might be a custom, you know, list of items that don't have a specific determination or designation, but you can do that to provide that kind of further validation. And then at the end as well, in this particular case, I would output, for example, a score, which could then be retrieved by another playbook or used in the parent playbook now. And again, in the same way, you set the variable name, you set the help text description, and the only difference here is that you have to obviously tell it what information from this playbook to include in that output. And one of the great things as well that like previously we had to do a lot of coding for inside playbooks was to deduplicate lists, because sometimes you can get the same domain 10 times in the same event, and if you didn't do your deduplication and ran it through an API, then that was 10 API hits for one domain, which obviously is pointless and wasteful. But again, the playbook itself, you've got a few other options, like you can order them. So if you kind of throw them a bit out of whack and you want it to be a bit more ordered, it will now sort of snap back for you. Not much else has changed. The only other thing is it does kind of save as you go as well. And then you can discard all of your changes just in one go by pressing that button whenever you're ready. As you can see as well, the kind of the icons for the actions and some of the blocks that you can do in Playbook, they've slightly changed, and there's been a couple of things renamed as well. So these code blocks are what were previously called legacy custom functions. So they're kind of code that is tied to the playbook, so you can't reuse it other than copying and pasting it into another playbook. The utilities, though, utility playbooks are ones that are stored externally to the playbook, full of Python code that just take an input and output something, but they're not tied to a playbook. You can call them in multiple playbooks and obviously use them across your entire SOAR platform. Also, you can now just drag and drop items in instead of having to do the whole drag a line. There is also, I can't remember where they were, but there is also keyboard shortcuts as well. So you can actually now build playbooks. If you're one of these sort of shortcutty type people, then you can actually do a lot of those actions, such as adding blocks, moving things around, etc., with your keyboard now as well. There has been quite a big move recently into that kind of visibility and usability with other functionality than a mouse. For example, they implemented slash commands quite a while ago, where you can run actions from a more of a command line capability inside of an event. And they changed the colors as well to blue, because the green and the purple were apparently too bright for some screen readers, etc. So this is just another way of providing that kind of better accessibility across the board to being able to build playbooks. So once I've built this particular playbook to do that one little thing the same way every time, I can then pull it into another playbook. So this is my parent or automation playbook, if you like. So this would just be triggered from some sort of automation, ingestion of an event. Then I call my playbook, and here you can see I can actually stipulate what to put in to my sub playbook. And because I put that IP classification on that first input, it will automatically filter on fields that would likely contain an IP address. Obviously, if I have got other custom fields, for example, that would contain an IP address, then I can unselect the filter. But by setting that data kind of type, not only will it validate it when the playbook runs, it will also present you the most likely fields that it's going to be able to accept. Again, you can deduplicate that list before even pushing it into the playbook, which again is genuinely, from someone who does this a lot, it's a great feature rather than having to write custom functions every time just to deduplicate pieces of information. And then when you come out, obviously you can use the information in your decision. But one of the really great things that you do, what they've changed right now, is that you can actually name these kind of the outputs. So if you have like 4 or 5 different routes out of this decision, previously you'd have to open this bit on the side in order to see, all right, okay, condition 1 is this and it's going to go this way, condition 2, and sometimes we'd generally write it in like here, like what we would do, sort of, green equals bad, yellow equals good. And the only way that you could kind of determine what each path did was by looking in that or looking at the tooltip. But now you can actually sort of define what that path is. And once you've drawn it, you can also flip it if you want to as well. And then that line knows, okay, I'm going down from condition 1 and I'm going down from condition 2. And obviously in this case, just to kind of write the story that I'm trying to show, is obviously you've got your IP scoring. I'm going to get the score. If the score is above whatever, I'm going to send it down the high risk actions. And if it's anything less, then I'll send it down other actions. Obviously, you could go more granular, sort of low and suspicious, like my risk-based response talk. But just for the purposes of the demonstration today, I just wanted to show this. Anyone who uses Phantom or Splunk SOAR, and is used to the little API block, it took me a little while, but it's actually in the utility. So you can, obviously utilities will bring up your custom functions, but it will also give you all of the old API capabilities as well. Took me a little while. At first I was a bit like, why would they remove that? That was such a simple block, but they haven't. They've just kind of nested it in here as well. The only other thing that I would say is there is a lot of new community playbooks and custom functions now as well. So they have kind of ramped up. And as you can see, Phil Royer he's pretty good at building playbooks, and these are all kind of example playbooks. Most of them can't be lifted and shifted, but they can be good to kind of get ideas about how you might want to implement it, or they could be sort of taken down and then changed to reflect, your company nuances, for example. But the main one that I would highly recommend anyone who's into Splunk SOAR have a look at is the custom functions, because they've gone quite big on getting a lot of these kind of heavily reusable code functions out there, because obviously, especially now with it being used a bit more case management-y, so there's a lot of that, and that stuff isn't out of the box available. So there is a lot of things in here that are great for utilities as well. But that's it really from me. The visual playbook editor is a good thing. It does kind of improve playbook development. Some of the extra things that they're doing definitely makes it a more robust product. And yeah, I'm kind of excited to see what they start doing next with this. But the only downside I would say for anyone looking to move to the new version of Splunk SOAR is there's no conversion of horizontal playbooks to vertical playbooks at the moment. It is literally, you would have to rebuild it from scratch using the new playbook editor. But yeah, that's it from me, I think. Thank you for listening. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I'm just bringing the slides back up. Doing it through Teams is a bit slow. Wait, actually can be a resume button, so that's really handy. So everyone who's still on the call, does anybody have any questions about any of the announcements or anything that Tom has just shown off? Oh,
not a question from me, but just to say that was great, and I'd missed at least a third of those announcements. So yeah, thank you for collating it and putting it all together. It was really useful.
Yeah, it seemed this year that of the last couple of years, at least to my memory, they've had a couple of super sessions with all the big announcements in it. But this year they only had the keynote with some sprinklings of news, and then you had to actually jump into all three super sessions to get information, and then from there their own separate sessions for further information, like the platform announcements. I had to go from a super session into the Splunk Cloud session because a lot of it was just touched upon. I think this year they had a quite shorter presentation, so there was less time and less content than someone could go through. So it's probably a curse of that.
It did seem much more granular this year, didn't it? It did seem more granular, and like you really kind of had to hunt for what you want, what you knew you wanted to see. But yeah, I mean, overall there was definitely a lot of content, and obviously I think we've got some slides about some recommended talks in a second too.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It felt a little less like a live event. I thought it was great having loads of the content available on demand. That was really good, and especially now it's available after the event as well. But there wasn't much that was live, was there? So you lost your thread a little bit and had to go digging yourself to find the info. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, a lot of self-direction required and discipline.
Yeah, that's it.
It's not quite the same, is it? Hopefully next year we get to go out to San Francisco, which I found a bit of a strange one. I didn't realize they were going to move from San Fran. I didn't realize that had become a big hosting place, but I guess I prefer it to Vegas personally. So,
well, that's another thing I've missed. I hadn't seen that at all.
Yeah, they announced it. It's a bit earlier as well. It'll be like beginning, I think it's in the first couple of weeks of October 2022. And they said San Francisco. They haven't gone into any details about where. But yeah, it'll be interesting because obviously Vegas is kind of set up for this sort of thing. Whereas I'm not aware of San Francisco being kind of big for hosting these sort of things. But maybe there's something they know we don't.
Well, last I heard, I thought they'd signed a long-term contract to have it in Vegas. So that's very interesting. Maybe to do the effects of the pandemic, perhaps.
Yeah, possibly, or maybe like Vegas, like they soured their relationship when they pulled the in-person conf at the last second and changed it to virtual.
Oh,
maybe Vegas didn't like that, so they just they got blacklisted for a year. Pure speculation. This isn't anything new.
You might be onto something there.
Anyway, we have some recommended sessions. Oh, here's Harry. He'll know the stuff.
No, I was just going to say I've got to run for my dinner, so unfortunately, no behind the scenes. But Andrew, Tom, thank you so much, and thank you both for taking the leadership of this group forward. Really appreciate it, and you highlighted some things that I'd missed as well. So yeah, it was great to see a summary.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Enjoy your dinner.
Problem. Okay, so just to speed things up a little and make sure everyone gets their dinner at some reasonable hour. So there's a couple of recommended sessions that I watched. I didn't have a lot of time to watch a lot because of work commitments and the fact that this is literally 4 days after Conf. In general, Splunk Trust sessions are great. I've only seen the one so far outside of Tom's, but Tom's is technically not a Splunk Trust one. So Admins Anonymous, Best Practices and Useful Tricks Learned the Hard Way is presented by, can't remember the name, but he's quite high up in Hurricane Labs. If you've done any Splunk work, you've probably seen Hurricane Labs website show up in odd places. And he just talked about how just everything that admins should remember in their day-to-day role, like app precedents and things like that. Like the most stuff that you probably know, but might have forgotten down the line. Pretty sure there was something that I didn't know that I wrote down, but I don't have the notes on this computer, so I can't remember what. But it's normally like one of those yearly things to watch. I don't know if there was a security foo this year, which is always fun to watch either. If there is, that I'd recommend that, but I don't think the guy's doing that anymore. The other recommended session, although this is like recommended because it's useful for me now, is and avoid data loss while forwarding into Splunk with low-cost advanced redundancy architecture. So it's essentially how do you do disaster recovery in a system that generally isn't high availability? So even though you've got clustering within search heads and indexes, and they can handle like a site failure without too much of a hassle, you do have individual components that you need to ensure that are replicated, like your master nodes and your manager nodes, and your deployment managers and things like that. But also heavy forwarders, if you use them, which my client does, you need to work out how to keep files and fish buckets and apps and all that sort of stable enough So the presenter of this has essentially created a VM, essentially just copying one Splunk instance to a copy, like an exact copy. So if a heavy folder goes down, you can bring the new one back up with the same GUID, and the deployment server's just like, oh, I recognize you, and it just continues as expected. It taught me that you can just chuck your fish bucket directory into another heavy folder, and it will just work, which is great because we're having to deal with that right now at my client, just because of regulatory requirements. I'll go on to Tom's recommended sessions.
Cheers. Yeah, so I said it earlier as well, let's talk about risk. Risk has been pretty big in the Splunk kind of arena for a while anyway, but I think it's finally kind of, lifted off, if you like, because there's obviously, it's all fine and dandy having things like machine learning and AI doing all these kind of algorithms and anomaly detection, but most of the time they rely on almost perfect data. And anyone who's actually worked with Splunk, a customer, knows that there's no customer who has perfect data. So the problem with ML and AI is if you feed it rubbish, you get lots of rubbish out the other side as well. So risk is a different way of kind of, just using kind of predefined scoring and predefined thresholds and understanding of what your risk appetite is inside of a company. And it's actually, I believe it's a quicker and easier way to get yourself to, the kind of edge of using risk to be able to not only reduce the amount of alerts you have because you're basing it on a risk rather than a per event basis, but again, when you use it with my risk-based response and risk-based alerting together, you've almost got this gold standard of risk that you can just feed back and constantly develop your risk appetite and portfolio. So the risk-based response one, I'm sorry, I had to put it in there. It is my talk. I know I had a full slide on it earlier, but it is also a recommended session of mine. Again, me and a lady called Hannah Cornford, who's the global head of security innovation at HSBC. Also, there's full speed ahead with risk-based alerting. So there is kind of, they've focused a little bit more on it inside the enterprise security tool. And this was just talking about a kind of, some of those updates and some of those ways of using risk-based alerting, at that kind of high volume approach. And then also, case management. Phantom's always had like a case management capability where you can work through tickets, assign it to users, etc. But obviously it's been quite, I would say, clunky. It's not the main design of the product. So kind of Phantom was built API first, and then it bolted case management on. And so it's never been kind of like free flowing. But what they're doing with this talk is that they talk about both risk-based alerting, obviously generating the events, and then how you would perform kind of automated and augmented case management functionality using some of the capabilities in Phantom. They also kind of talk about out-of-the-box playbooks and workbooks that they're playbook agnostic. So, for example, they will provide you with a main playbook. And then if you have, for example, a playbook that does IP enrichment, all you have to do is tag that playbook with whatever the playbook that they provide you with is looking for. And then when it gets to that stage in the loop, in the process of IP enrichment, it just goes and calls all of your existing playbooks. So you're not having to kind of build playbooks that fit in. You can just use your playbooks that you've got to link into this process that they provide you simply by tagging that playbook with IP, for example. And when it gets to the IP bit, it'll just go, right, how many playbooks do I have that will do IP enrichment? And it'll just run them, wait for them to finish, and then obviously move on to the next one. It's a pretty cool kind of end-to-end sort of capability that they present. And they were lucky enough to get their hands on the new VPE before Conf. My talk still uses the old one because it hadn't been released on-prem before Conf. So unfortunately, I had to show the old clunky version of Phantom with the horizontal playbook editor. But again, lots of stuff. If you're doing anything with risk at the moment, I highly recommend watching some of these videos based on risk. Again, 44 of them to choose from. Thanks.
So Splunk themselves always put up a list of the top, like the most popular sessions. I'm not quite sure how they gauged it. It's probably from survey responses or like viewership metrics. But
I was going to say probably viewing figures more likely. I would think.
Yeah. So there's a good number of talks there that I'll probably have a look at myself at some point. And just leaving this open for anyone who attended Conf this year, if they had any recommendations for sessions that you want to give anyone else in the call.
Nope. Sounds like a nope.
Yeah. Recommendation dinner, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have one thing. I don't know. Oh, yeah, the wheels got a little bit of animation. That's what it is. So we did start with 5 people eligible, but we're now down to 3. Purely because we can't actually email the specific people. So I want to share my screen, but I don't want to get rid of the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to do it on my machine. So just clicking. It literally, so it literally stopped the like I've tried to take a screenshot in for the chat. It's very, 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 very close. Let me just paste this into your chat. I need a new laptop. Yeah, so it was literally like a thread between Scott and Guangji, and Guangji just pipped it.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
That's someone's name that I took out the list. I'm having difficulties with my Mac.
Blame Microsoft Teams.
Blame Microsoft. Yeah, absolutely.
It is. Just add
I had to learn to say it a little bit more recently because we're obviously using it in the company now. Like previously, I was like, "Oh, Microsoft," but now I've got to be careful.
I must admit, the one advantage is I can stalk more people now on Teams by seeing when they're available and jump on them.
Yeah, indeed. But if anything goes wrong, it's always Microsoft, in my opinion. It's always one of their products on the MacBook, just kills it.
I cannot add images for some reason, so
you want to share it with me in chat, and I'll see if I can upload it, mate.
Yeah, just for evidence, because
Yep, no, that's fine. I trust you. But yeah, if you just fire it to me in Teams, and I'll see if I can upload it. If you can send it to me.
But yeah, we'll send. If you can send an email or a message to one of us, we'll go and get the license key. Oh, it's wanted to work. Okay. So just finally, Splunk User Group Edinburgh. We've got obviously the user group page. We've got a LinkedIn page, and we've got a Slack channel on the Splunk community Slack. Is #Edinburgh. It's not really used much. I used it today just to promote this. Don't think anybody looked at it, but it's there if you want to connect with any of us outside of a user group. I'm quite active on there. Tom, probably more active on the Phantom one, but we both use Slack regularly enough to be able to just pick up anything there.
Yeah, if you're on the Phantom, if you're in the community user groups thing, then I generally keep my eye on the Phantom one. So please feel free to drop in and ask anything if you're using it.
Yeah, and obviously we've put email addresses down there. So if you have any questions, or if you want to contribute to, if you want to contribute to a future user group, feel free to email us. We are always looking for presenters to provide content, because it generally is myself or Tom, and it used to be Harry quite a bit as well.
Sure.
So always open for people to present.
Indeed.
And with that, so thanks for joining us.
Thanks for hanging on.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I'm looking forward to the day when we're back in Edinburgh and we can come up and drink the beer out your fridge as well. And also less likelihood of me being ambushed by clients halfway through like happened tonight. So I'm going to go and rewatch some of the recording once you post it online. But it's really interesting to see the new Phantom interface, because I've never upgraded ours in the test lab. I should maybe go and have a new poke about with it and see what's changed.
Yeah, no, I do think the improvements are really good. They've also upped things like the playbook runners by default as well, so everything should be a bit smoother. But yeah, the new playbook editor and those new playbook types are pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the session will be put on YouTube, hopefully within the week, and you should be able to get to it through this event page, because with every event we'll put the video as a post-event action.
Yeah. Easy to access.
But I'll also send an email out with the YouTube link as well.
Great. Good job, Andrew. Thank you.
I do. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks very much for your time, and until next time.
Yeah. See you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much.